Svalbard has always been the base of countless expeditions. Explorers set off from here to look for a new sea passage to the Far East. This is where the race to the North Pole began. Attempts by ship and sleigh failed. Later, explorers tried to use gas balloons and were finally successful with an airship.
Yeah, ice is not a big consideration except during winter.
Claire wants to go sailing together with her fellow student Jaap from the Netherlands.
If you have a problem, then it starts getting a lot worse when you're up here because the water is so cold that you get hypothermia in a few minutes.
But otherwise, the Arctic Ocean is just as suitable for sailing as other seas. Longyearbyen has its own sailing club and the weather conditions seem perfect.
We're more used to clouds and fog. This is a nice day.
Claire is sailing for the first time, but it won't be a problem with Jaap, who's very experienced. Suddenly, the weather changes. A storm comes up in the middle of the fjord. The wind blows the small sailing boat around. It's hectic. Then suddenly... Claire falls into the ice-cold water. But she's lucky. Our boat, from where we're filming, is quickly there and Claire is rescued.
It's not every day that you go for a swim in the Arctic. I didn't think at that moment that I was in freezing cold water. I just thought about getting back to the boat. I didn't want the current to take me too far from the boat. I tried to swim as best I could, but the water's so cold. Your fingers, hands, and feet just freeze.
In general, you can just pick someone up. You have to sail 100 meters away, turn around, pick them up slowly, get them in the boat, and then usually we do a few quick maneuvers just to warm up again. Because the dry suits keep you dry, so then you get cold, but you warm up as well. If you're wet all the way, then you start getting into trouble. But yeah, in the big wind, it's a pretty normal situation.
Simon and Claire are on another expedition. Weather measuring instruments are being set up by their team 15 kilometers outside of Longyearbyen. The meteorologists are gathering data again. There's a good reason why Svalbard has its own university. It's not just climate change that's being researched here. The energy reserves under the eternal ice and the largely unknown Arctic Ocean are of interest to scientists. Everything here revolves around biology, geology, geophysics and Arctic technology.
The geopolitics of the Arctic is getting on the political agenda worldwide. And I guess we used to say that we educate the Arctic experts of tomorrow. And I think it will be beneficial for people working on these issues in the various countries, in government agencies or private companies. It's an advantage to really have an Arctic experience, hands-on.
It's the weekend. Simon and Claire are treating themselves to an excursion. There are only 40 kilometers of surfaced roads around Longyearbyen, and they don't lead anywhere. In order to see more of Svalbard, the students have just one option: a boat trip arranged for tourists.
We're on our way to Barentsburg. We've saved up a little for this. Since we're here, we want to see the second largest town. It's quite expensive, but I hope it's worth it and we have a nice day.
Es ist ziemlich teuer, aber ich hoffe, es lohnt sich. Wir haben einen schönen Tag.
Claire and Simon are basically going to Russia because Barentsburg is a Russian mining town. They get a first taster from the Russian mining town of Grumant, which was built in the 60s. The Svalbard Treaty means Norway has sovereignty over Svalbard, but the islands are neutral territory. All of the signatories are allowed to be economically active here. Besides Norway, Russia is taking most advantage of this by mining coal. Arrival in Barentsburg. The town is named after Willem Barents, who discovered Spitzbergen in 1596. Claire and Simon are excited.
I'm not sure what to expect. I've heard there's a statue of Lenin here. I'm curious to see the inhabitants.
Ja, bin mal gespannt auch auf die Bewohner.
The two students are entering a different world. Barentsburg is now largely abandoned. It's home to only around 400 people. In the 90s, it was almost twice that number. Coal mining isn't very profitable. There's not much money being invested in the town. But Russia keeps on paying for the Barentsburg adventure because it wants to maintain its presence on Svalbard. The structural decay is visible everywhere. An oppressive atmosphere dominates the town. The workers, who are mainly from Russia and Ukraine, don't have much left. Nevertheless, they try to make their daily lives worth living.
I'm dancing. I like swimming. Well, I play in basketball with friends, something like that. I like sport, so every evening I come to sport club and dancing or something like this. This place is not so good on the first sight, but I like here because I got a lot of friends for this.
Most workers have their families on the mainland. They choose to work here because of the extra pay. Claire and Simon are thoughtful after their brief one-hour visit to Barentsburg.
It's a bit grim. You can see immediately that this is a pure workers' town. They work in mines. They don't look like they have a joyful life. By comparison with this place, Longyearbyen is the jolliest city on the planet.
It's not easy to work in a mine and then working in such an inhospitable area in this desolate town. That makes it even harder.
Back on board, there's a typically Norwegian speciality waiting for them: waffles and coffee. And there's another speciality that only exists in the Arctic. The ship is approaching the Esmark glacier, the first bits of which are already floating in the water. The drink of choice here is whiskey on the rocks, with ice that's thousands of years old, glacier ice. And then the tourists get to see the gigantic edge of the Esmark glacier.
Seeing it so close up is impressive. The colors and the quantity of ice, it's awesome.
I'm impressed by this wall of ice and by the structure. I think it's great. You really know that you're in the Arctic when you're looking at this.
Back in their student barracks, it's party time. Young people from all over Europe come together here. Almost all of the students only spend a semester or two on Svalbard. That doesn't leave much time for partying together. And once in the party mood, it's easy to have some crazy ideas like building a hot tub. Knocked up out of wooden pallets and tarps, once filled with water, it looks like it might fall apart. The young scientists are definitely clever. The warm water is coming through a hose from the shower on the second floor of the student barracks. And then it's time for some dancing in the world's most northerly nightclub. The place where the students are partying now was once used to feed the miners and their families. The mining industry came to Svalbard in the early 20th century. It was like a gold rush at the time. Life in the Arctic was anything but easy and pleasant. The people even worked in the most severe winters. Trappers hunted polar bears and Arctic foxes in order to sell the hides to fur dealers. They accepted the reclusive life and the dangerous overwintering conditions in Spartan huts. The miners are still here, but their working conditions can't be compared to what they once were, because coal mining is now fully automated.
Es ist einfach kaum zu glauben.
It's hard to believe that we have the technical abilities now to make life quite pleasant up here.
When I think about the fact that I'm studying and I have a nice life and I get a lot of leisure time. So it's quite something to be here where the people worked so hard and weren't here for fun.
They were able to live here, although this place is so inhospitable. It's not really made for human habitation.
But people have managed to master the inhospitable Arctic to this day. Max is on an excursion with his course in a very modern polar boat. Their destination is the ghost town of Pyramiden, an abandoned Russian mining settlement around 80 kilometers from Longyearbyen. The environmental technology students are exploring the abandoned territory, looking at the aspect of environmental pollution. In 1998, mining and the settlement were abandoned from one day to the next. Everything was left to decay for years. Finally, over the past few years, the clean-up operations have got underway. Professor Mark Hermansson still thinks there are environmental pollutants here, such as highly toxic PCBs and asbestos. He's walking through the town with the students. Maybe they'll find clues.
Come down now, please. Yeah, could you please come out from there? We are not welcome in that area. And just for further reference as well, we are not welcome in any of the buildings in the area either.
Some Russian workers are here to oversee the clean-up operation and to guard the buildings.
Like the guide said, some of the buildings are open, others are closed. But that doesn't matter. We're not allowed into any of them. Our professor's going to have a look, but that object there seems to be forbidden. That used to be the fuel storage.
A state-owned Russian mining company is responsible for Pyramiden. It doesn't seem to want to cooperate with the university. The professor is angry.
I've attempted to communicate with them, but they don't respond to any of my requests for information about collecting samples or even staying here for more than a day.
Most of the buildings are closed. There are clues in some places that suggest continuing pollution. The students will return without samples that could give them information. The professor suspects that the company doesn't want them to investigate the damage.
It might mean that somebody would need to come here and remove the contaminants or to clean this place. And as you can see, as you look around, cleaning this to any degree would be a very, very large undertaking. It'd be extremely expensive.
Max takes photographs that show what life used to be like on Minuten. There's a certain consternation.
You imagine the Arctic to be white and pure, then suddenly you see a dirty coal mine, which makes you think about what they're doing to the environment.
This futuristic-looking building near Longyearbyen is also enough to make us think. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault. The aim here is to store the seeds of all the agricultural crop plants in order to protect species diversity in the event of a global disaster. The seeds are stored at the end of a tunnel in the mountain. At this depth, the permafrost would keep the seeds cool for 200 years, even after global warming.
It must be an incredible project to store every seed here. It's inconceivable.
Visitors aren't allowed to access the vault. Even Roland van Bothmer only comes here twice a year to service the technology or to coordinate the delivery of new seeds. 4 armored doors and movement detectors protect the seeds from unwanted guests. The storage vault lies high up enough above the sea in the rock. Even if sea levels were to rise as a result of the complete melting of the glaciers in Greenland and the Antarctic, the vault will remain dry. The seed collection from more than 100 countries was only set up in 2008 and is still in its infancy. Only one of the 3 chambers has been filled to date.
We're aiming at having all unique seed samples of the world, and that's around between 3 and 4 million seed samples. And we have to date around 700,000. And we can store in all our 3 chambers here, roughly all of them when it comes. But it takes a very long time before it's filled up.
We want to show nature that we're trying to conserve it, that we're building a Fort Knox of biology, and nobody can get in here because we keep our greatest treasure here. I think that's a good idea.
Ja, da ist unser größter Schatz drin. Den wollen wir da behalten. Das finde ich klasse, die Idee.
I think it's good that we're trying to preserve species diversity in the event of a disaster. You never know what'll happen, but it's also a shame that this has to be done because we have to expect that something bigger will happen. Like a world war or a natural disaster.
The Arctic autumn is short. The days quickly